One of the key factors that makes manifesting work is your ability to focus your mind on one thing long enough for it to take effect. Focus can be developed many different ways, one of which is just simply to do things that require focus. And yes, it is possible to develop your ability to manifest at a higher level simply by practicing the manifesting process over and over and over again until you develop the strength of focus that you need for truly magnificent results. However, there are other exercises that we can do to help enhance our manifesting ability, and this is like cross-training for an athlete. Whereas an athlete can improve their ability to play their particular sport by simply playing that sport over and over again, they can also enhance their ability to play that sport by doing other exercises that simply work the same muscles in different ways. In this capacity, we can exercise our mind in different ways to enhance our ability to manifest our desires. The general areas that I teach to enhance your manifesting efforts through the exercise of your mind fall into four main categories: observation, memory, logic, and creativity. In this video, we're going to talk a little about using your memory to enhance your manifesting efforts. And the information that I'm going to share here will not only help you with your manifesting, it will also help you in many other areas of life as well. Many of us have had the experience of meeting someone new and 10 minutes later having trouble remembering what their name was. We also need to use memory in a lot of other areas of life, and so this exercise that I'm going to share with you can be beneficial in a lot of different ways, not just for manifesting. Now, all of us have at least some experience in memorizing details. We've gone through school. We had to memorize a lot of different things. We had to memorize the alphabet. We had to memorize the number system. We had to memorize mathematics, multiplication tables. There's a ton of stuff that we had to learn when we were in school. In our jobs, we often have a need to memorize data, whether it's facts, figures, names, dates, places, all of that kind of stuff. But we also have a reason to remember various things even in the manifesting process itself. As an example, if you wanted to manifest a particular outcome with a specific person, you want to be able to visualize that specific person with all of the details that represent who that person is: height, weight, body shape, the image of their face, the sound of their voice, the color of their hair, the color of their eyes, the smell of whatever perfume or cologne or whatever that they might be wearing. All of these details can make a richer visualization in the manifesting process, and by remembering all those details and taking those details into that manifesting process, you can make it more effective. Another thing that I often recommend people memorize to take into manifesting is the feelings that they get when good things happen. I mean, if you had an absolutely wonderful surprise, a blessing that is far beyond anything that you have ever experienced before, you might be feeling like, oh, wow, this is so cool. And when you have those experiences, you want to pay attention to them and memorize what it feels like. Because that type of feeling taken into your manifesting efforts, visualizing the thing that you would like to experience and have that feeling strong and vibrant within that space, it makes the manifesting so much more effective. So memorization, there are a lot of different techniques for improving your memory. Most of these are called mnemonic devices. There are several different systems that memory experts use to be able to perform well beyond what anyone normally can do. I mean, one of the classic examples is memorizing a deck of cards and somebody shuffles the cards and makes them random order, and you've got to go through and flip through and flip through and flip through and remember what order the cards were. Or another classic example is the number pi, an irrational number that starts off 3.1415927 and then goes on from there forever without anything ever repeating. And there are some people who have memorized the digits of pi well beyond 60,000 digits. Quite an accomplishment. So these memory systems that the memory experts teach, there's 4 general ones that are relatively common. There's one called person, action, object, where you tie the details that you want to remember to a scene that you can think of that features a specific person, a thing that they're doing, and an object that they're doing that action with. And then that's one memory system. I'm not going to talk about that one. I really know very little about that one. There's also what they call a word peg system, where you set up a set of memory pegs within your mind, and it can be just a list of random words. It really doesn't matter what it is, but it's a set of pegs that you memorize to start off with, and then you use that over and over and over and over again, and with use it becomes so familiar that it is very, very easy to use for those who choose that system. The most popular memory device, the mnemonic device, is something called the method of loci, L-O-C-I. And this is a spatial representation. And some people might recognize this as called the memory palace, which was used in some Sherlock Holmes stories, where this master detective, obviously he had very highly developed powers of perception, but those perceptions would not make any difference whatsoever if he didn't also have a phenomenal memory to remember what those details meant. And so this method of loci is a very popular memory system among the memory experts. And some of the different ways that this is used, the memory palace idea is one where you imagine a building, and it could be your home, it could be an imaginary building that you construct within your mind. And each room of the building represents different categories of information. And so as you learn new things, you add on to this building, kind of like the Rembrandt house, where they keep building and building and building and building over and over and over again. But you keep adding to this memory palace. And within each room, you place the details that you want to remember about whatever it is that you're learning. That's one way that this method of loci is implemented. Another method is as a pathway leading from one place to another. And again, this could be a real pathway. It could be the pathway from your home to your work. It can be the pathway from your bedroom to your living room. It can be the pathway through a wooded area. And again, it can be a real place, a real pathway, or an imaginary one that you construct within your mind specifically for this purpose. And then the pegs are the different stops along that pathway. It's said that some of our common phrases, such as in the first place, in the second place, that type of thing, when we list items in order, those places originally meant specific spots on a pathway of a memory device. So there's that system that a lot of memory experts use. There's also another system that I tend to prefer myself, and this is a link system. It's also called the chain method. And this is basically where you take an original point that represents the starting point of when you need to remember something. For instance, if you're remembering a grocery list, that first link in the chain might be the grocery store itself, so that when you get to the grocery store, that triggers the rest of the chain as it goes through. I tend to like this system because it is very much relatable, and the associations are more natural, at least for me. It's less of an artificial system, and it's just easier for me to work with. Another thing that I would like to point out is that when you are exercising your memory and trying to remember new things, it does help if the images that you are remembering, or the sounds, if that is part of what you're memorizing, if the sounds that are connected to what you're doing, what you're remembering, the system of information, the organization system that you're creating within your mind, it helps if the details are extravagant, ludicrous, absurd, way beyond what you would normally experience in life. Because it is these differences that make things easier to remember. Now, as an example, here, I'm going to tell you a little story here. I first wrote about memory as a method of enhancing manifesting in my very first course that I wrote back in 2003. And in the exercise that was devoted, or in the lesson that was devoted to memory, I had created a short shopping list of 6 items and used that as an example. It's the example I'm using right now. It was a grocery store list, and basically it consisted of bread, milk, mayonnaise, steaks, paper cups, and shampoo. And yes, I still remember it 20 years later, even though, 20 years later, even though I very rarely go back to this example, I did go back to it a couple weeks ago, so it's very easy for me to remember right now. But even when it has been a year or 2 years, it's still relatively easy to remember because of this link system, this chain method, and because of how ridiculous the images were that I created as for this example. So here's the story, and this will give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. So in my mind, I remembered this short list of 6 items, and it could have gone on for quite a bit longer, but 6 is enough for an example. So in my mind, I imagine that I'm driving up to the grocery store, and the grocery store is not a normal building. It's a giant loaf of bread. Item number 1 on the list. Giant loaf of bread replaced the actual building itself. So to figure out, okay, milk, how do I add milk to this? Okay, the grocery store is on fire. There's firemen that are squirting milk on the bread to put out the fire instead of water. Okay, that's how we add milk to it. Mayonnaise, okay, how do we get mayonnaise into that? Okay, so the milk being white, squirted onto the fire heats it up, coalesces it, and it comes down as mayonnaise. Okay, so very ridiculous images, very easy to remember. So I got that. So, okay, we've got those 3 items. Now steaks. Okay, how do we add steaks to this? Let's see here. Okay, maybe there's people doing a tailgate party, celebrating the fire, and they're cooking steaks on the grill. Okay, so we've got steaks in the mix here. Paper cups. How do we add paper cups to this story? Okay, let's see. Steaks. You got to eat it somehow. So rather than serving it on plates, we're serving it in paper cups. So we've got that. Now, shampoo. Okay, how does shampoo fit in all this? Okay. Alternate universe. Completely ridiculous. Alternate universe. Everything is different. And in this alternate universe, you cannot serve steaks without topping it with shampoo. Shampoo is the ultimate steak sauce in this alternate universe. Not what I would like to eat, but it helps to remember the list. And again, you could add on to this over and over and over again. And if you have to, you can rearrange the items on the list so that it makes sense in the story, so that one thing is linked to the next thing. That's what makes it so memorable. One thing is linked to the next. And that linkage and the ridiculous images make things so much easier to remember. Now, obviously, the more you practice using your memory, the less you need these types of systems. It is relatively easy for me now to just look at a collection of information, a collection of facts, and find a way of representing it inside my mind, partially with the method of loci, where there's things that are placed in different relationships to each other, and so the whole conglomeration is easy for me to remember. So I do use that system to some degree on an informal basis. You can use any system you want. There are lots of people teaching memory systems. In fact, when I was studying this way back when, actually not so much, maybe 20 years ago. No, it's been a little more than that, about 30 years ago, about 1990, somewhere around there. Dominic O'Brien was the top memory champion at that time, and I studied the courses that he published on how to use memory. And he's got systems for remembering numbers because he represents numbers as shapes. For instance, a number 1 would be a rocket ship, number 2 was a swan, number 3 was a pair of open handcuffs, number 4 was a sailboat, and it just goes on from there. So in his system, to remember the digits of pi, he constructed this pathway, and he placed those different objects along that pathway so that he remembered the 3.14, on and on and on and on and on. And so just some ideas to play with. I do encourage you to exercise your mind as often as possible, because not only will this help you get by in life, it will also make your manifestations so much more powerful. So that's all I have for you today. I wish you well, and until next time, be blessed, my friend.